I can't tell if you two know each other or not.
You know, people spend more money on dog food than baby food.
You're trying to tell me when you saw Casablanca, you didn't think about me.
Look at you figuring things out for yourself.
It's unfair, but it's over.
I need to talk to you.
I can explain.
I know you can. You're a very, very gifted storyteller.
The answer was right in front of me.
So I suppose I'm not going to see you anymore.
Let's go! Let's go!
We've got a gypsy and a hobo.
And who are you supposed to be?
Welcome to Mad Men, the weekly show where we discuss a show that used to come out weekly. Each week, we take a close look at an episode of the AMC series Mad Men, which ran from 2007 to 2015. And we're changing the conversation of the show all these years later. Where one of us is a first-time watcher of the show, one of us went through it one time back when it was airing, and then there's me, who watches it, I guess I used to say pretty often, but I actually haven't watched an episode in a couple of weeks now, which is kind of weird. I'm John Negroni, and I have two people here, because it is October and it's Halloween, and one's dressed as a gypsy and the other's also dressed as a gypsy. Will Ashton and Mike Overhols.
Trying to get us canceled on this podcast.
And who am I supposed to be?
Are you? Do you introduce us both at the same time? That's new. I kind of really like it when I have my own personalized. I don't know what's happening here. Is this Russ?
He loves eating horse meat. His name is Mike Overhols. Welcome, guys. This is a big episode of Mad Men, and I know that we're getting toward the end of season 3. Very exciting stuff. And Mike, is it true that you binged a bunch of these episodes at once because you couldn't wait at something that has happened before?
Yeah, I truly don't understand how you could wait watching these episodes. Like, This must have been agonizing when the show is coming out weekly, because I mean, this is everything. This is what you've been waiting for. This is the culmination of so much of the story. So yeah, I all these episodes for our discussion blurred together because I just watched all of them together because it's one cohesive story.
I know what you're referring to, right? The culmination. Finally, we know like what Greg is going to do. About his job. That's obviously what we've been most curious about.
What else would I be talking about?
I don't know. That's, I guess, why even specify, right? So The Gypsy and the Hobo came out October 25th, 2009. So we're actually recording this a couple of days before it aired, 14 years ago. So look at that. This was directed by Jennifer Getzinger. She directed My Old Kentucky Home earlier this season. And the episode was written by Marty Noxon, Catherine Humphries, and Matthew Weiner. Marty Noxon, I don't remember seeing that name in any of the previous episodes this season.
Oh,
but I know they co-wrote The Inheritance.
Yeah.
Is that what you're going to say?
Well, sorry. I was just going to say that's a creator of what was that show that was on Lifetime that was like popular for one season?
Well, I know So Noxon is very famous for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Okay. She was an executive producer on that. And then she also worked on Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce. I think that's one you might be referring to, or Unreal. I don't know what Unreal is, but
Unreal is the one I was thinking of. That was like a big hit for the first season, and then I think it kind of tampered out. But that was the show I was thinking of.
All right. Also worked in some films too as a writer, but also Catherine Humphries co-wrote an episode earlier in this season as well. That would be Love Among the Ruins. So yeah, as we've kind of mentioned, this is a big episode. And in terms of the viewership, definitely a big bump in the ratings from last week. So The Color Blue, that one hit 1.61. This jumped to 1.72. And we can say, like, from this point on, the ratings just like continue to climb. This is like when Mad Men really started to come into a lot of popularity, actually. So there you go. Okay, Gypsy and the Hobo. I know, guys, that... I mean, this is a big episode for Will, because Will, your first time watching the episode, you, of course, got to experience a lot of things here for the first time. I don't want to start in any particular order, but I kind of want to start with the stuff with Roger, if that's okay. I know Mike is looking at me like, how could we wait? But I just kind of want to do a check-in with Roger this season. This is my least favorite Roger of Mad Men. Not that he's bad in season 3, but I think he's at his most unlikable in the show, even compared to season 1 and season 2. This episode's kind of interesting. It's an episode where he reconnects with an old flame. So a character named Annabelle, played by Mary Page Keller, and they have this kind of like rekindling thing. And there's this moment where he has a chance to, like, maybe maybe run away with her and stuff. And it's kind of an interesting like thing inside this episode. I've always been of two minds with it and the way it contrasts with the Dawn storyline. But yeah, what were y'all's takeaway from this? Mike, I know you're a Roger fan. You quote Roger to me all the time. You say things like, John, women are objects.
Yeah, I mean, we were just together in person for the first time in years, and I think that was my opening line. I got in your car.
Yes.
That's the first thing I said. I mean,
it is true that Mike and I got to hang out in person last week, yes.
And it's so rare for it to happen, you know. Me and John never hang out, so it was great. No, Roger's great. You know, love Roger overall. It is a bad version of Roger, but I do love this story arc, or not even arc, this encapsulated story within the episode, just because it's so different, right? It's seeing the cards reversed, right? It's an older woman. It's not Roger with all his younger flames and everything he's doing. It's you could see how maybe he was the one maybe taken advantage of by someone in power, or you know, it's just kind of a foil to everything we know about Roger and seeing him deal with that. I
have to agree. I love the line where, you know, they're kind of like bickering a little bit, and Casablanca gets mentioned, and Roger says like, that woman got on a plane with a man who was going to end World War II, not run her father's dog food company, which I actually thought was pretty funny. Will, were you surprised that Roger didn't cheat on Joan, or what was your takeaway from that?
I'm not surprised, I guess. I mean, I think it's definitely a great parallel to what we see with Dawn later in the episode, in the sense that him and Roger and several other characters are sort of confronted with the fragility of their relationships, both at work and at home, primarily at home, actually. But in the case of Dawn and Roger, they're both having to come to terms with someone meaningful and eventful in their past, and reckon with how they can live with themselves now when that person, or that person that, or, you know, dead person, whatever, comes back into your life with a force. It kind of wreaks havoc on what they've built for themselves at this stage in the game. I think my only real complaint with it.
So you're calling, just real quick, you're calling the parallel between like Roger's past and Dawn's past, and how both of them kind of just want to forget the past and, you know, move forward. Sort of.
I mean, I don't know if Roger. I think his feelings are a lot more complicated as far as his relationship, because I think there is genuine love and trust there. But I mean, especially with her being like, as a client, her need to kind of move forward, but being tied to the past as well, in the sense that she has this tainted brand where people know, you know, what goes into the dog food, and like she needs to either kind of move away from the name or shut down the business. And there's a pride there where she doesn't want to move away, and Dawn's kind of pressing her to acknowledge that you know, you can't move forward without forgetting the past, or, you know, moving away from the past. But Dawn's never really been able to do that, as much as he professes that he can. And I think, you know, I mean, we'll get into that later. But as far as Roger is concerned, I think this would have been better if maybe it kind of played out over like 2 or 3 episodes. Like, I think this storyline got a little too congested into one episode, even though I really like it as a parallel to what's happening with Dawn and Betty.
I see. So you're saying like if we had like met Annabelle a few episodes ago, and it's like, oh, we're working on this account, and just like little subtle seeds of it before we get to this moment, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I just think like if we had a more complicated like understanding of like, oh, like should Roger leave Joan for her? Like, should he? Not Joan. What's her name? Jane. For her.
He does have that moment with Joan in this episode, to be fair.
That's true. Over the phone. Yeah, I mean, I do like how it plays out ultimately. It just feels a bit abrupt. And I guess it's intentional as far as like him kind of cutting ties with... Yeah,
he's kind of blindsided a little bit. Like, she kind of comes back into his life quickly, which there is something kind of that does feel true about that. So...
Yeah,
but, I mean, I do like that. I like that parallel where she can't let go of her past with Roger. She can't let go of the dog food company name. right? Like you were saying. And then I guess there's this interesting thing about how just like, Roger, is kind of rejecting. I wonder if like they're trying to set up, maybe this is how Roger and Dawn could mend their fences because they're of the same point of view in this respect. But, that's still to be seen, isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, as far as Roger is concerned, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he's much worse here than he is before. I feel like this season he's been a real kind of thorn in Dawn's side, so it's not as fun as when they're a couple of gents ragtagging him around the town.
This is the season where he's in blackface. He has these unlikable moments peppered in. He has that whole thing. Like, I don't like being judged. And like just like complaining all the time, and it just feels like there's like that insecurity he has over getting older. That everyone's kind of looking down on him for what happens with Jane. And I guess, to be fair, this is the episode where we do find out that apparently he was a bit of a Hemingway, he was like a boxer and all this stuff. And that's why have we ever talked about how cool it would be for a Mad Men prequel just about Roger when he was like in his 30s?
I mean, you mentioned that as far as if there was a Better Call Saul equivalent for Mad Men.
Roger Sterling or just Sterling or something.
I mean, I maintain, I think, for me, I don't know if you've actually talked about this on the air or if you just texted about it, but I think I'd be more interested in Cooper's story here. I mean,
Cooper's
feel
story?
like...
Well, that would be part of Roger's story, wouldn't it?
Sure.
And you're right. We text about this every night.
Yeah.
Right.
But no, I mean, I feel like it has to be, I don't know, like the reason Better Call Saul worked is that we never got to see Saul Goodman's home life, so there was just a lot of room to play with that, and I feel like we just don't know anything about Cooper, at least at this stage. I mean, who knows? You guys know what happens later down the road, but I feel like Cooper is the better option because he's such an enigma about his past, and in the same way that
we get breadcrumbs up until this point. We know at this point with Cooper that like he never had children, that he has like the horses in Montana or wherever. So I mean, there's a little bit we've gotten so far.
Yeah.
There is another character you haven't met yet, by the way, Will, related to Cooper, who I'm sure would be like a main character. I mean, I think Mike might remember who I'm talking about.
I don't know. I just feel like Cooper's such a delight. Yeah.
I just want to be on a record and say, for the sake of the integrity of this podcast, I'm not on board for any prequel series. And let it be said that one of us is level-headed.
All right. So Mike wants the Sally Draper spin-off show where she's not even that. What do you want?
Come on.
You're like Roger and women. I can't figure you out, Mike. What do you want?
Just look at, here's what I'll say. I'll take it seriously. Just look at the Many Saints of Newark. So The Sopranos is such a prestige, perfect show. And then they went and made that god-awful straight-to-HBO movie, and it's tainted it. And I don't want anything to taint Mad Men. It's a great show. Almost a perfect show. Breaking Bad got lucky. Breaking Bad got lucky.
I think Many Saints of New York was all right. I don't have as negative of feelings on it, I guess you do. But I agree it's not as good as Sopranos. But yeah, I mean, if you had asked me after Breaking Bad if we need a Saul Goodman show, I would say no. I mean, what do we need to learn about this guy? He's a scuttlebutt. But then you watch Better Call Saul, and it's like, oh man, this is an amazing work of television that rivals the greatness of one of the greatest shows ever made. So it's like, yeah, sure. I mean,
because it's Bob Odenkirk, and it's the same actor playing the same role. You're not going to get that with young Roger.
Sure. That's true. I think you could go with the Saw approach, though, if he was still with us, where you just put on the hat backwards. And just be like, I'm young Cooper.
But yeah, I do like the Roger portion of this episode because I do like the extra stuff we get about where he came from, and there's just like I feel like there's like a new light kind of painted on him that kind of spells why he is the way he is, not just because a woman broke his heart. I think that is certainly illuminating, but even just kind of getting this glimpse of Roger being a bit of like a bohemian, right? And not always being like the dutiful company man, right? Like kind of as we're alluding to, the things that he did before he kind of settled down, not just with Mona, but with Sterling Cooper. I just think that even just like the suggestion of that life is super interesting to me. It speaks to, I think, like why there's a connection between him and Joan still. and why they connected at all in the first place, because it seems like there is a side to him that he kind of hides from people, and that he let himself kind of show to Joan. Speaking of Joan, all right, so we all know that Greg he's not the best. He is a rapist. We know that. We also know that he's going to be going into a new job. What is that job, boys?
The Army
therapist.
Army therapist. You were both right. This was kind of interesting to me. So okay, he can't be a successful surgeon unless he goes to, or he's kind of convinced like, oh, Vietnam, that's like days away from being over. So he enlisted in the Army because they need surgeons. And it's kind of, it's a very tense scene, isn't it? Like, I just kind of had this weird sense that like Joan wasn't quite sure what she was going to do. Like if she was going to be happy of like, wait, he's not going to be around anymore.
Right.
Or what?
I mean, there is a twisted logic to like what he's saying. I mean, you know, in the broad sense, but yeah,
he does reveal that he went through psychiatry when he was younger, or that his father did.
Yeah. But no, I mean, the fact that he just went ahead and did it without consulting his wife, you know, without really thinking about the repercussions of his actions outside of his own, you know, well-being professionally, just kind of shows the staggering selfishness of his character, which we, you know, already kind of knew based on his aforementioned actions. But yeah, I mean, not a great guy, but I mean, I'm curious to see what happens with him and Nam.
Do you think she's actually happy though? Or do you think she's pretending?
So for me, there's two things. I do think she's a little bit happy because for the day and age, I think she's happier telling people that he is going to be in the Army than she is just being like, he was not a field surgeon, but going to psychiatry, which wasn't as respected as profession. I think it's much more respected to be able to say, oh, he's going to be a GI, right? Especially for the time and age. You know, we're still not too far from World War II. We're fresh out of Korea. For the older generation and the more established, working class or upper working class, I think the military is much more respected compared to the counterculture, younger crowd that the show is really going to lead into as Vietnam goes on. But for me and him joining, I think, you know, classic Mad Men speaking to the world we live in even already today, but just how the military takes advantage of those who are down and out or feel like they have no other options to go and join and sign your life away for things like that. I will speak just from experience. My brother is in the military. Not a choice he always wanted to do, but because he had a tougher life and felt like he had no other options. And I know a lot of people who are in, you know, similar stories, not saying that serving your country isn't a good thing. There's many people who love their military service, but I know a lot of people who also regret doing it, but they had no other choice. And it's the path life offered. And I'm seeing this here, and it's been happening in America for a long time, and it's still happening today and in other countries as well. Right. But
yeah, I think that's very astute. And I kind of like the subtle comedy. I don't even know if it's intentional of like Greg does this after Joan hits him with the vase. And you could almost sort of like take that as like she knocks some sense into him, but just in the sense of like he finally like figured something. Like she has that line where she's like, "Oh, look at you figuring stuff out on your own," and it's almost like she's also talking about Greg and being like, "Good, he's finally solving his own problems. I don't have to be his mother anymore." And I just wonder if it's like partly her just being like, you know what, fine, like I don't care that much. But it's also kind of dark to even assume that. Like I wonder if even she would never admit that.
Sure.
She's happy to be rid of him.
But I think there is that sort of empty nester kind of mindset, because I was wondering watching it if the wheels are turning in her head as to being like, oh, this will give me an opportunity to go back to work at Sterling Cooper. Like, I don't know, because she kind of reestablished that connection with Roger. There's that. I mean, I think she's, you know, not totally dishappy with her work, you know, like selling, you know, lavish coats and whatnot. But I think there is something where she feels unfulfilled there. Like she feels kind of boxed in to this secretarial, you know, kind of job where she wants to kind of thrive like she did at Sterling Cooper. So I don't know. I mean, the fact that she has an in still with Roger.
Mm-hmm.
She's definitely unfulfilled. I mean, I think she views what she's doing as a job, and what she did as Sterling Cooper was a career, and something she can hang her hat on.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. All right, is it time that we talk about it? The dog food focus group? I loved it. I love that whole scene. We was like, stop eating that.
Fun fact, this is the first time I read that they called it a focus group and not brainstorming.
Is that in Mad Men Carousel?
Yep, that is correct. I reread the chapter for this episode.
You sacrificed so much.
I know.
I didn't do the director's commentary for this one. Didn't have time, unfortunately.
Oh, la-di-da. So important episode.
Sorry, I don't have any fun tidbits.
This episode's so important that we, had to wait. But then you just don't even do the stuff that you usually do for an average episode of.
You don't even seem that mad. You're trying to come off as like, oh, but if anything, you're just like, it's all fun.
I don't know. I'm just here to goof off and talk with my buddies, Mike and John.
Oh, where are they? Oh, dang it. Too quick.
I'm right here. I'm not going to let you bully Will. This is what the writers went on strike for, is to be nice to Will Ashton. I do want to have any of us, either of you guys, how do I want to pose this question? Do we, as a collective group, have any experience with focus groups on either side?
No comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, John surely would have some kind of experience.
Hey, I didn't know if you could talk about, just in general terms, but I have been in a focus group. I have been the person being asked questions for a big company based out of Seattle who makes video games, and I would play test and then answer questions before they were released. It was very cool, very fun.
Simple questions,
and they would give us pizza.
Yeah, simple questions like, what is your name? At what age did you lose your virginity? How many wet dreams have you had over a relative? Stuff like that.
Michael,
I'm
Seattle,
assuming
29 and 84.
Are those the questions they write down to test the new iPhone, John?
So I think what I love about the dog food focus group is it also captures the anxiety that Don has about himself, because he sees the Caldecott farm thing and he sees that like this dog food that, it's horse meat. And he's like, well, you can't really change that's what it is. So you have to change the name. And it's like, it's so obvious, right? It's so clearly like Don's like, you have to change the name, like to Don Draper Dog Food. It's so like the clear issue that he has, the butting up against Annabelle on this issue. It's such a clear strike at their philosophies. It's the perfect episode, of course, for him to have to confront this with Betty, where Betty is essentially in that focus group and is like, no, like you're horse meat and you have been lying to me and like this is who you were the whole time. And that fear he has of being rejected because of something he can't change, he can only dress up and rebrand, right? That's what comes to the forefront. And I just think it's just such great writing and so indicative of the show. Like, they put their effort into it. Now, Will, how do you want to describe this whole sequence? We have the whole thing where Don and Suzanne are going to go away for a little bit. He thinks Betty's not in the house with the kids and everything. He goes in real quick, and then a lot of stuff happens. So, what do you think, Will? What was your takeaway from all this? How did you emotionally handle it?
I mean, there is a general sense of inevitability to it, in a sense that, like, before, Don, would be a little bit more willing to separate.
There is suspense. There's a bomb under the table. We know about it, but Don doesn't.
But, like, even as the scene sets up, like, I mean, obviously we know that Betty knows from the last episode, but there's also the fact that Don brought, the woman of his affections here to his house, that like his kids could just, run into the driveway and see her, that he's not really even pretending to hide anymore. Sure, street. But like, even still, like the fact that he's so willing to kind of, let pretensions fall down, that he's like, having an affair with a woman in his neighborhood, that he's less likely to kind of, put up a mask, as it were, for Halloween.
Yeah, he's not being careful. Like, he was being way more careful on the train, which is weird with her. Compared to here, where it's like, he's not that far from the house. Anybody could see he's getting out of the car with a woman who's known by people in the community.
Right.
Like, it's weirdly, like, it's almost stretching belief a bit and kind of being set up with like, well, we have to do this so that she ends up waiting in the car, and that's crazy. But yeah, it's not the best. It's not the most elegant thing, because I don't know if I fully buy that he would stop being so careful, like you're saying.
I don't know. I mean, to me, though, it builds up the suspense in a sense that, like, obviously there's suspense caked in as far as Betty knowing, and this is the first time she's seen Dawn and is able to confront him about what she knows, but also, like, if this extra thing is going to be found out. And I feel like a lesser show would have just added, like, would have turned into kind of like a almost like melodramatic kind of like revelation after revelation after revelation kind of thing. And I like that this scene, like there's the tension building up, but rather than leading to this kind of explosive moment where like they're yelling at each other and all this stuff, Dawn just kind of droops and falls, and like the facade of Dawn just kind of slips away, and Dick is finally introducing himself to Betty. And I think it's some of John Hamm's best acting.
Yes,
in the
100%.
kitchen and in the bedroom. I mean, just the way he's able to kind of blend the two performances, but bring this innate sort of sympathy, even when he's, objectively done, a pretty heinous, disloyal thing. And it also has a woman that he's having an affair with, not even a few feet away from his house. And yet you watch this scene, you just kind of feel pity for the way that Dawn has to like kind of take these splinters out and kind of reveal the intricacies of his tragic upbringing. It's dramatically pretty incredible stuff. And January Jones, holds her own as well. I'm not trying to shortchange her performance either.
Yeah, I love the way that she makes him squirm. But it's like you're saying, it's not played for like dramatic Hollywood blockbuster effect. It's played as like a very specific and precise character piece so that John Hamm can give that kind of performance, right? Like, it's not something that happens out of desperation. It's clearly like calculated, every second of it, that Betty clearly is planning, because as we saw earlier in the episode, she has that whole thing with the house, right? She now sees it like with the house that she can have the money to support herself if she tries to divorce Dawn. The problem is she has to have reasonable cause, right? So we can kind of see the gears turning of like, if she decides to hold this over Dawn, could she see a way out of this marriage or kind of reconsider it and everything? Because I think she's going into this meeting with him not knowing what's going to happen and not knowing the consequences of like, if the world finds out about this, he's not the only victim, I am. Because if there's one thing we know about Betty, she doesn't want people to see her as a failure, right? I think that everybody finding out about this would be horrible to her reputation. I don't think she gives a shit about what it does to Dawn whatsoever, or their kids. I think she's confident that she can handle the kids fine without him around.
Yeah,
I mean, if anything, she wants it to hurt Dawn, right? I think she would be vindictive in that sense.
But she was also having sort of her own affair as well. So it's not even that it's not even that she's really angry about the unfaithfulness. It's just, I think the fact of knowing is central here. The fact that she just doesn't even know who she's married to at this point.
Exactly. Yeah.
But can I say? I think on the rewatch, the thing in that regard, the thing on the rewatch that really hangs up Betty, that really is interesting, is the marriage. It's not like like the fake identity is part of it. She doesn't know who she is, but it's who is this woman that he was already married to? How did he not already tell me about her? It's all of it's that piece that I think is just so interesting. It's not like the deceit. It's not everything. It's just, how could he have been married and not told me about it? Who is this woman? I'm not the first. Like, it's just so interesting to her characterization that's the piece that just blows her brain up. And all of the things that Dawn or Dick has done wrong, that's the thing I think she hangs on to the most.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think that's so true.
I was going to say earlier, one thing I also find intriguing, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but I do like that this scene shows the evolution that the show has done stylistically and dramatically, where I feel like the first season was kind of honoring the more kind of like kitchen sink melodrama style of like the late 50s, or actually the 50s in general. And I feel like as the show's getting deeper into the 60s, that, you know, like in film and television, I feel like we saw more of an introduction of kind of more like naturalistic, kind of more, you know, thoughtful, kind of weighted performances. And I feel like the show is kind of mirroring that cultural transition with its own storytelling, as well as just a general, I think, confidence in letting its performers and writing really carry it. I don't know if you agree or disagree, John and or Mike.
I would say stylistically, even in episodes like this, you can see that the lighting, even the lighting itself, is a bit different from like in the earlier episodes when we were still transitioning out of the 50s. There was more of a vibrance to it, just down to the clothes people wore and how often like episodes took place during the day. Whereas things have been getting darker, we have more scenes that are at night in the wee small hours. There was a whole episode called The Fog. Like things have just been getting murkier in general. And there's like this building dread to the JFK assassination, to be sure. Even this episode itself, where we have him in the doorway, and he's like kind of lit, right? As Don Draper, the kids are kind of huddled around him. It's like a horror movie. He looks over, sees Betty in the doorway, and she's all in shadow. Like she's been in the dark this whole time. And like there's that whole moment where he's looking at her and he's like, "What'd I do this time? Uh-oh." But then, yeah, he has no idea what he's really in for. So, I mean, as usual, yeah. I mean, Mad Men just... the blocking itself is just always incredibly done in that way. Yeah, Mike, I mean, what's always been your takeaway with this whole scene? I mean, it's a long scene, as it needs to be. We don't break away from it. We have Don and Betty's big moment. What did you think of it? First time and most recent.
I just think in both times, it's crazy that, and maybe I speak to myself, but I would imagine because of how well the scene is acted, is how could you just not be on Don's side? When he sits there on the edge of the bed and painfully talks through the pictures in the box, I just, as the audience member, and you know even more than Betty how horrible you mentioned. We know there's a bomb under the desk that Don doesn't know about. Well, there's a bomb in the car that's even bigger. It's nuclear that Betty doesn't know about, and you're still sitting there going like,
two bombs.
Damn, yeah, that's so hard. Like, good for him for telling her, like, all right, yeah, trust, like, this is good. And I don't. There's a part of you that just can't help but be so empathetic with Dawn in that moment. And that's I think the magic of Mad Men. It's empathizing with these extremely what's the word? I've been drinking. It's just you can't help but feel for Dawn.
You're just like Dawn. You're just kind of the words. You're getting drunker, and you just can't even form the sentences at this point.
I love the look on.
Hang on.
I'm toasted.
You have the same look that Dawn has when Betty's like, I know what's in there. Also, and he's just like, his heart stops.
I will say, on a much lighter note, and I already shared this to the group a while back, but as compelling and heartbreaking as the scenes are, I just kept thinking of the SpongeBob throwaway joke where, like when they're on the snow thing, and the guy keeps having his like outfit changed to a little bicycle and like the lollipop. He's like, sure. I can explain. Imagining Don just always being like, I can explain.
Just give him a second. Let him do his thing. Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. I know we talked about this before in terms of, people always have theories for like why Don keeps this at home. Like, does he want to get caught? Right? Like Betty, I think, even says that. And sometimes I kind of don't love that rationale. Like, I get what it's sort of trying to do and mean, but like part of me kind of wonders, like, I think he wants it close to home because he is from the Depression era. We talked before about like that is a thing of like keeping your money and very important things at home because you can't trust, like there is like a built-in distrust of banks and storing things in a public way like that. And I could absolutely see him be like, this is safer at home. And I also kind of think he does have that arrogant hubris of like, Betty's not going to go through my things. Like she knows her place. Right. And I don't think he ever even imagined or fathomed that she would have the gall to do this. Or to like, to break it open or sneak into it or anything like that. And so I don't know. I struggle with that a little bit. I know it's something that gets brought up a lot and people, I guess, subscribe to it. I don't think I do.
I do subscribe to it, but I don't think it's a conscious effort. And this is what I was already thinking about bringing up when you two were discussing why he would bring her to the home and why he would fly too close to the sun. And I do think in part it's to have that dramaticness between the confrontation and her sitting outside in the car. I do think the show writers write that in. But
do you think it's the dick inside him struggling to get out? Let me out. I want to see everybody.
It's the dick in the box. No, I do think, and this is in real life, I do think when you are that unhappy in a marriage or a relationship, whatever it is, I do think there's an unsubconscious level to you that wants to create a self-fulfilling prophecy of being caught. And it looks different for other people, and it does come through as arrogance, or it comes through as complacency in Don's case after doing it for such a long time. And so, yeah, I do think it is absolutely believable. I think on both ends of the spectrum. I think with Betty and what she has going on with Mr. Rockefeller, a sister man, and what Don has going on with little kitty school teacher. I think both of them know that this marriage is over. They've tried, they've ignored it, they retried again, they came back together, and it's just been miserable. Neither of them are happy, and so both of them want out. I don't think either of them have realized that they want out, and they're doing everything they can to actually make that happen.
Well, you've been married longer than any of us, that's for sure. Yeah, where do you fall on it? Do you think Mike is right?
Yeah, I mean, I forget if it's this season or last. I think it was this season when they went abroad. Yeah, it was a season. Yeah, they spent time in Italy, and it's like the only time they can really be happy as a couple at this point is when they adopt different personas and like they kind of pretend that they're younger, pretend that they have a more lavish life.
Well, also
that
when they're with the kids, right? Like when they have the kids and they go to the park, and there's that persona too. It's like, well, we're the Rockefeller painting, family.
But I think that's also like a different kind of facade. Whereas this is like a facade that they can like have fun with and revel in like a more playful way. That kind of like, because I think the happiest they were was when they like were, like she was a model, he was just like an up and coming ad man, and like they were kind of forming their family, but there was like it was still kind of playhouse. Like they were just having, at least based on the little clues we get about their early lives and from different episodes, that it seems like the real happiness is long since faded. There's no real way without just make believe that they can get back to that, and so. Yeah, I don't know a way forward for them that ends with happiness.
I would have to agree with that. I feel so bad for Suzanne Farrell, getting stuck in the car. Sometimes when I rewatch this episode too, I have this Mandela effect where I always reimagine it as like he forgets, right? And it's like morning and he's like, oh yeah. And then he goes to the car and he's like, oh man. And she's just like, oh, I hate you so much.
Sure.
That doesn't happen. I don't know why I have that memory, but I keep thinking that that's what happens in the scene. But no, instead, she just leaves. We see her kind of just leave the car, just be like, damn. And then they talk on the phone and there's like the kind of breakup and everything. I also always forget that like the breakup kind of happens the way it does, where it's a little bit more final. I always felt like it kind of fizzled out more. So I don't know why I have that memory. I mean, it does kind of fit what we're watching in a way, because it is a relationship that does fizzle. But I got to be honest, I do wonder at times if there could have been something like if Don and Suzanne had some kind of romance outside of this deception, if their personalities would have really clicked, because there does seem to be like kind of a similar connection he has with her that is pretty similar to the connection he has with Rachel. I'd say that like since Rachel, like Suzanne is certainly probably a better match for the guy than other people along the way. What do you guys think? Are you guys Suzanne fans, or am I on my own?
Oh, I mean, I've already established I'm a
Suzanne
fan, but
you're not a fan. You said, or
no? I say am a Suzanne fan.
Okay.
But what I was going to say is like in this episode in particular, but also the last one, it seems like Don is maybe the healthiest relationship we've seen with a woman outside of his like ex-wife that we only really got to know for one episode. it just seems like he this little moments we get are, I mean, not like a perfect relationship, obviously, for several reasons, but it seems like they actually have a kind of loving, respecting, sweet relationship. And yeah, it seems like between that and then like his previous marriage with Mrs. Draper, the real Mrs. Draper, I guess. It seems like he can't really have like these happy relationships unless there's like some sort of like facade or like like barrier or something. It just kind of adds to the complexity that we see with the multiple layers of Don/Dick.
This is what I love about Mad Men is, Will, you go, yeah, this is his healthiest relationship, and it's his fucking daughter's teacher who he like tries to help her like ill brother pay off and like leave, and lies to her about it after like knowing them for like, I don't know, collective couple of weeks, and we're like, yeah, this is the best one. But I gotta say, I do like Rachel Menken a lot. I think I'll always personally like Rachel Menken as any Dawn lover more than anyone else. But as someone, my very first crush in life was a kindergarten teacher. When I was in kindergarten, I was pissed that I had the wrong teacher. I had the old lady compared to the cute young teacher. I'll never forget that. I was like 6 years old, and that's, the staple in my life. And so, yes, I do understand the hot for teacher disease that Don Draper does seem to succumb to. So
you're saying that you're disappointed because you had the young teacher and you had a crush on the older one, that you were unable to...
The literal exact opposite. So I don't know if you're
I was joking,
listener
but
or...
Wow.
I was joking, but see, I can understand the joke didn't play out well, so we can move on.
I'll take the blame for this, dog. Nothing's ever on you, Will. I love you too much.
There's this scene where, the whole moment where Don is explaining himself to Betty, and he's kind of telling her like it was never romantic, and he's kind of walking her through his life story. I love it. I love just the character blocking of it, the way he's pouring a drink and he's kind of shaky. You kind of see that he's kind of battling between Don and Dick. I think he's a little scared to go full Dick on her. Don't laugh, guys. It's serious. But he genuinely is just trying to I think be Don, because he doesn't want her to think that he's a completely different person. I think that's part of why the performance is so genius. But also, I could never get over the fact that, at least up until this point of the show, the man will not admit, and I don't think he possibly could at this point at least, that the whole they made a mistake. They thought I was him and he was me. Motherfucker, you did that. You switched the dog tax, and it's not something he's owned up to yet. So yeah, it's pretty sad. He won't say it to Betty. He won't tell the truth.
At the end of the day, though, just such a rock solid episode. This is an episode of Mad Men that you watch and you just can't help but go, God damn, this show is the best.
Is there anything else that you guys wanted to get into before we go off and conduct a couple of our own focus groups with our family and friends?
I want to talk about your bookshelf. Which would make for great audio content.
It's so related to Mad Men, too.
I know. So I see you got the Pixar Theory book. I've read that one. It also looks like you have Killer Joy. I've read that one, also by John Negroni. Looks like you got Dune, a book that you claimed you didn't read, but now say you have read. I've read that one. What other books you got there?
I do have this book called The Moment Where They Go Trick-or-Treating, and, Sally is a gypsy, and his son is a hobo. Very offensive costumes. And we see Carlton.
They're both Dawn. Dawn is that both the gypsy
you came away with? Okay, go ahead.
And the hobo.
What's your explanation for that?
Well, that's admittedly something I read in the Mad Men carousel. But
so then, what is Matt Zoller Seiss's?
No, it was one of his contributors, I think. But yeah, it was an interesting takeaway that because he mentioned how the kids originally wanted to be Minnie Mouse and an astronaut, and the astronaut represents this future, this uncertainty that Dawn's afraid of, and also Minnie Mouse represents this capitalistic idea that represents Dawn's personal life that he pretty much at this point despises and wishes that he could remove that mask from his life. And I like that he go ahead.
Is that what Sally was? Minnie Mouse? Because
that's what she wanted to be.
Wanted to be. That's right. Well,
Yeah, and then
'cause
Dawn was like, I want that costume, and Dawn was like, you'll never wear it.
Well, I missed that part of the episode, and Will just told me that she was a bitch. So
Whoa.
Will,
What the heck?
be nice.
that's what he told
What
me. Texted
happened?
me. That's what he's dressed up as.
I honestly, I do think of Don as the hobo, going back to the hobo code and something that I think he's had a long sort of relationship with. I always considered Betty to be the gypsy.
Gotta say,
Kind of sexist of you.
I gotta say, I agree with John. That was also my own read, and I wasn't gonna bring it up. That is one of the more interesting things I read in the carousel was that tape because it is so different. I literally did, because it's such a dichotomy in the episode between Dawn and Betty. I thought that's why both kids were represented as the same dichotomy, right? Because you kind of you reap what you sow. Like who you are becomes like who you produce, and but maybe that's just too obvious. And Mad Men isn't about the obvious, so it does kind of make sense that it could be both of the Dons. I think thematically could see that being make much more sense.
Well, that'll do it for Mad Men. Thank you so much for listening. And next week is The Grown-Ups, episode 12. And this is an episode that I'm very excited to talk about with you guys. We definitely need to talk about it ASAP because I can't wait to rewatch it. But thank you as always for listening. Yeah.
Can't wait to watch and discuss it in January 2024.
Sorry, I think you meant to say January 2025.
Yeah.
I'm going to start dropping like wrong tags like to incorrectly date our episodes. So be like, man, really just loved watching Patterson in Peru.
Paddington?
What's his name?
Peru, yeah.
Patterson. I think on that note, it's time for us to sober up.
Happy Halloween, everybody.